Whereupon we started making out and probably started unbuckling each other's clothing. And he stopped me and says, "You can't do that." I said, "What do you mean? You don't like Asian men." I said, "Why don't you let me be the judge of that?" Hi, this is Mike Balaban. Welcome to another episode of BAMMER Tales. Today I'd like to tell you about the only cross-cultural, cross-language, cross-race relationship that I've ever had. It took place in 1998-99 when I was stationed in Tokyo by my New York-based investment bank for what was supposed to be a 3-year stint. It only ended up lasting about 16, 18 months. I've already recounted in a separate episode how the week before I moved to Japan, I went out and picked up someone and negotiated a sexual transaction and paid for sex for the first time ever in my life. The reason I did that was, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it now, but I wasn't really attracted to Asian men. And I thought I'd be in Tokyo for a long period without having access to Caucasians. And as a result, I might go long periods without sex or dating. Fortunately, I can say now that that changed pretty quickly, as I'll describe in this episode. When I got to Tokyo, I was there a short period, and I was joined by another friend from New York who got stationed by his firm there. And so I had a good local best friend. Let's call him John. And John quickly was enamored of someone who worked out at Tipness Gym in Roppongi Square, where we both worked out. And he was basically falling all over that guy. The guy was seemingly a local, Japanese, muscular, good looking. And my friend John kept saying hello to him and kind of chasing him around with a hangdog look on his face. And I ended up playing the role of the Cyrano de Bergerac, if anybody knows that play, or the more recent romantic comedy with Steve Martin called Roxanne, where a good friend ends up advising the person seeking someone he's in love with and provides the words that go in the mouth of the person, the suitor seeking the lover, and kind of is behind the scenes the whole time. Well, I was that way for John. I was kind of telling him, be careful, don't push too hard, don't look too desperate, etc. Well, one night, and by the way, I nodded, said hello maybe twice to that local guy in the course of the month or so we were working out at the gym together. Then finally, one Sunday evening, I was there late as the gym was about to close at my locker and dressing, and I looked over and the local guy was 2 or 3 lockers away from me. And he looked at me and said, "Hello." I said, "Hello back." He said, are you busy? I said, what do you mean busy? Because, well, you always seem so busy. You're running around a lot. I said, "Oh, I'm not sure that's a positive reputation to have, but no, I'm not busy. Why? Would you like to have coffee?" Okay. I was a little surprised because, I hadn't paid him any attention. John was the one that was pursuing him. Well, the gym closed. We went across the street to a coffee shop. We had coffee. And the guy's his name is Kenichi. It turns out he's actually born in Korea, but moved to Japan at age 5 with his mother and siblings when his parents divorced, and had been there for 26 years. He was 31 years old. And turns out, he said, "Well, are you and the other guy partnered?" I said, "No, we're just best friends." He said, "Good, because I'm attracted to you." And I went, "Oh," which kind of complicated things because the guy who's providing the advice to the lovelorn suitor ends up being sought after by the object of the suitor's affection. It was a little complicated. So he wanted me to agree to meet him on a date. And I said, "I can't do that until I've talked to my friend. I don't want to hurt him. I will not do that unless he's fine with it, but I'll broach the subject with him and let him know what happened." I tried all week to get John to agree to go to brunch with me on the weekend that was coming up without telling him why. Eventually, I managed to get him to commit to Sunday. We got together. I described what had happened with a rather forlorn and unhappy confession because I wasn't looking for this guy. I wasn't attracted to Asian men, but he came after me. John said, "Oh, what the hell? Go ahead. Have fun. I'm fine." Just as an aside, John became so intertwined in the world of dating young Japanese men and had so many in his stable, like a bevy of beauties, that when I would move back to the States and come over on business to Tokyo, I couldn't get John to take time off to go to dinner with me. He was too busily involved with his harem. So you don't need to feel sorry for John. In any event, when Ken and I got together and had a date, he walked me home and I invited him up to the apartment. And we're sitting there and he said, "Have you ever been with an Asian man?" I said, "No, I haven't." "Oh." Whereupon we started making out and probably started unbuckling each other's clothing. And he stopped me and he says, "You can't do that." I said, "What do you mean? You don't like Asian men." I said, "Why don't you let me be the judge of that?" So needless to say, we proceeded. Things went fine. And in a relatively short order, Ken became my boyfriend. Now, it wasn't what I expected. It was in terms of dating an Asian man, and it's very different than dating an American man. But a lot of it had to do with culture and language more than race. He wasn't very educated. He didn't speak very good English, but he was nice and sweet and naturally bright. And lo and behold, Ken was the owner of the only Western-friendly gay disco in Nichome, the gay district, the nightlife district of Shinjuku, which is the large nightlife district. So Ken owned this disco, and it turns out he liked older men. He was 31. I was 45, about to be 46. I had never dated anyone that much younger than me, and until last year, it remained that way. And we started going out. And he would come over to my place a lot. I was never invited to his place. The Japanese are very private about inviting you to their home. But we got together a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if Ken had another boyfriend on the side. I know from later on, after I moved back to the States and our relationship ended, I would come visit him in Tokyo and he would tell me about the two boyfriends he had at the same time and who didn't know about each other. But Ken was a big deal in Tokyo. He owned this bar called Club Dragon, which is still there and kind of the center of activity for the gaijin or expat foreigner community. And when I recently posted on my Instagram some photos of Ken and told that story, I was really stunned when I got people coming in saying, "Oh my God, Master Ken was your boyfriend? You're so lucky. He's a god." He was sweet and nice, and it was really kind of strange having a 31-year-old boyfriend who made as much, if not more, than I did as an investment banker at 46. So money was never an issue. Ultimately, when it came time for me to return to the States, the situation wasn't working out. There was a schism in the office, and the Japanese didn't want us Westerners who'd been brought over to run the department there anymore, and it became really unpalatable. We decided to bring me back. When that happened, I gave Ken the news, and it was disappointing for both of us, but he kind of immediately shut down emotionally. Knowing that I was not going to be available any longer, even though I had 2 months to go, he started pulling away gradually. In any event, we remained close. He came to New York and visited me once a couple of years thereafter. I'll put that photo up here. In it, he has dyed blonde hair. And I've fallen out of contact with him because I don't think Dragon has an Instagram page anymore, and he's not on Facebook. But I have very fond memories, and I will tell you the biggest lesson I learned from dating Ken was that because our language skills, our ability to communicate linguistically was really limited. It was very simple language, and we struggled, but we did communicate. I had to learn to be very patient with him, and perhaps he with me. When you might have jumped to a paranoid conclusion that he was doing something you didn't want, it didn't pay to jump in and get all upset and angry, because as often as not, when we eventually cleared up what the misunderstanding was, in fact, his viewpoint on the issue was exactly the same as mine, or was something that I supported. So it caused me to have to be really patient and wait and not jump to conclusions. And I've used that to my advantage in relationships since that time. Anyway, Ken's wonderful. He did a couple of porn films back in the time I was with him. The reason he did the porn films was not because he had an ego or he wanted to be a porn star, but it was because as the owner of this very popular bar that had a $10 or $15 cover charge, when the guys from the sticks out in the countrysides of Japan would come to Tokyo, he wanted to make sure they came to his club and patronized it and spent money on drinks there, etc. So by doing the porn, which got into the hands of a lot of those guys who didn't have any other access to resources for a gay life in their small towns, when they came to Japan, they already knew about Dragon and they would come frequent it. And it just so happened that in the time when I was about to go back to the States, and I really didn't need to be at the office that much, Ken was going to be filming one of his porn movies, and he asked if I wanted to come watch. I said, okay. So I showed up in my suit and tie, and that really turned him on. And so I took him in the men's room, and I fluffed him. And for those who don't know what that means, fluffing is when you ministrate and manipulate someone else to help them get an erection. And since he had to be erect to perform in the porn video, he needed to get to that state fairly quickly, and me dressed in a business suit helped him do that. We went in the little bathroom off to the side. I probably went down on him for 30 seconds or a minute or so. He became hard. He went out, got up on a telephone spool that had been turned on his side, and essentially did a solo movie where he jerked off. And so I can say that part of my career was serving as a fluffer on one film. I didn't get paid, but the pleasure was sufficient. That's my story. I'd love to hear if any of you have had relationships across border, cross language, cross race, and how it was for you. I'm glad I had that experience, and I hope I may have others similar in the rest of my life. Thank you so much. Mike Balaban for BAMMER Tales. If you are a Westerner and you happen to like Asian men, then you're called a rice queen. And if you're an Asian man who happens to like Western men, you're called a potato queen. Fun facts to know.